think it's important for all of you to realize that passenger rail is not going to be successful if it's partisan. We have to get both sides. And in Wisconsin right now, we got a year coming up. We got a tough election in 2024. We'll run as we did in the previous years, even though we lost our state secretary who worked with me on mailing to every single candidate for the legislature, Congress, governor, and reporting that out to you. You're going to have to be active if you expect support. One person in the legislature made the comment, we're going to make sure there's no funds for additional service in Wisconsin.
Thank you, John. Terry, where did you find that horrible picture of me?
He looked hard and hard.
The internet a wonderful thing?
I guess it is. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be among friends. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and hello. Always glad to come and speak before you guys. You guys have done so much great work in carrying the water from the public perspective to let our policymakers, elected officials from mayors up to state legislators and the governor know how important passenger rail expansion is in your communities and to sort of the economic life of Wisconsin and the Midwest. As I've said before, and as you are seeing, and as John made reference to, we think we've certainly turned a corner. I've been on Amtrak trains 6 times within the past week. So New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Traverse City, Cleveland, really been traveling a lot to make the case for passenger rail. There's a lot of requests and a lot of demand to understand what's coming down the pike and what the opportunities are. We just got our ridership numbers in for fiscal year 23. We're on the federal fiscal year, and we carry 28.5 million customers. So clawing our way back to our pre-pandemic levels. We're up to more than 20,000 employees. One of our challenges has been that we let a lot of people go to save ourselves during the pandemic. And so it's been difficult to get all those employees back, especially in mechanical, customer service. And we ended up hiring 4,500 people last year, and we're on track to hire about that many this year as well. So bringing the employees back. Of course, that's not going to mean we get to have 28,000 employees because, of course, we have retirements. But ridership is rebounding strongly. Here's just a graphic over the last 6 years to kind of give you a sense. In our not too distant memory, we were really on a roll. In fiscal year 2019, Amtrak had just completed fiscal year. That fiscal year, we handled more people, offered more passenger trips than at any time in Amtrak's history. 32.5 million people travel by train. We were projecting that in fiscal year 20, we would achieve a net operating result of 0, meaning no federal subsidy would have been required to operate our train system. Through our state operating contracts and through revenues primarily generated on the Northeast Corridor, we would have been able to use all of our congressional appropriation for capital. Of course, that next year in fiscal year 20, the pandemic began to hit, and we hit bottom in fiscal year 21. We did, as I indicated, have a voluntary separation and an involuntary separation where we let go thousands of employees because our revenues just evaporated. There were a couple of congressional support bills like the CARES Act to backstop us with some dollars, but it wasn't enough. But unfortunately, the vaccines came, the pandemic subsided, and the demand for travel definitely came back. And so we are back up, like I said, at 28.5 million customers. We're at about 87% of where we were pre-pandemic. And much of that is because we're capacity constrained. Many of you know, and our friends at Wisconsin DOT have been pressuring us to get the train lengths back up. I came up to Sturtevant yesterday on a Hiawatha. It was 5 cars long, so we're making progress. We're getting the fleet back out there. Next slide, please. I forgot to ask my quiz question. Which country in the world has the most railroad track? Thanks, Terry. That's my fault. So mostly when I ask this question in all audiences, almost everybody gets it wrong. They guess China, Japan, but really the country with the most lines of railroad is the United States of America. I say that because I think that offers us, of course, most of that does not have passenger train service on it. But what that offers us is opportunity. We're a growing nation of more than 320 million people. And our leadership at Amtrak during the pandemic made the determination that the system is underperforming and it is not where it needs to be to serve the needs of a growing nation. So because we knew Congress was in the process of putting together a transportation reauthorization bill, we came up with the program Amtrak Connects Us. Next slide. We looked at the name. This is a map of the Amtrak system overlaid with the population hotspots of the United States. So many of you have seen maps like this. The larger the bubble, the more population there is. So that network, of course, belies that a lot of those routes are only once a day routes, or not enough service to handle the number of passengers that exist. Where we know what we're really weak is in the Southeast, the South Central United States, the Rocky Mountain region, and in the West. But again, there's more service that we need more service just all over the country and all of our regions. And so taking a look at that, our existing network, we determined that we need to dramatically expand service. So we came up with Amtrak Connects. This was to excite Congress, to excite the American public. I remember in the spring of 2020, as we were all coming back to the office, our leadership was sharing with us in the field staff, government affairs field staff, the list of the 160 communities that would get new passenger train service if our plans were implemented. And we were tasked with going out and talking to the mayors in the local communities before this came out, asking them what they thought of that. And the response was overwhelming. That is when that's when my travel began in earnest, as well as my colleagues around the country, visiting with communities, talking with them about this plan, and asking them to reach out to their elected representatives in Congress to include a robust funding for Amtrak in the next transportation bill. Fast forward to the late summer of 2020. And of course, that wasn't just us. That was all of you guys got excited by us as well. I know Jim Matthews is on the call. The Rail Passenger Association was really key in using their voice to push for expanded and more funding for passenger rail, like we have all been asking for years. But we felt we were at a pivotal point in terms of receptivity, some of our recent successes at Amtrak, receptivity among the administration and among the Congress. And in November of 2020, President Biden signed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, oftentimes called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that included in it $66 billion for rail expansion in the United States. That's more money that has been allocated just towards Amtrak in the 52 years of our existence at that point. So really a game changer. It turns out that our map was fairly conservative. We were only looking at 39 new routes, enhancements to 25 existing routes, and 160 new cities with 20 million additional riders on top of our 32 million. The Congress, we were pretty aggressive in our request to Congress that any additional appropriations should come to Amtrak, because we felt that there were a lot of places in the US that would not be as aggressive in expansion as the state of Wisconsin has been. Congress decided to go a slightly different direction and to distribute those funds in the form of competitive grants. Grants to states and eligible sub-state entities that would apply for the funds, the $66 million for the various programs, and partner with an operator, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Amtrak, to expand routes. It turns out that what we proposed was fairly conservative, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's sort of the pipeline as laid out. The federal government, using those resources that were provided in the bill, set up something called, one of the programs they set up was called Corridor ID, where they put out a solicitation seeking participation and an indication from states what routes they would be interested in setting up to use those dollars that will flow into the Corridor ID program. Those applications, first last year through May, there was an opportunity for states and sub-state entities to do something called an expression of interest, where you said, hey, we think we're going to apply, or the state said, we think we're going to apply for these corridors. And then by the time March of 2023 rolled around, the actual applications had to be submitted. I'm glad to say, and I'm sure Ms. Stern, who is here with me, will talk about some of the corridors that the state of Wisconsin applied for. Those applications came in. We understand from the Federal Railroad Administration that they received more than 90 applications for new corridors. Remember, we only proposed 39 new routes. The public and the states have asked for more than 90 new routes. We don't know all of them because those applications went through the Federal Railroad Administration. We know a lot of them because many of those locations in those states asked us to provide to jointly apply with them they asked for our support for their corridor applications. We expect sometime next month, either side of Thanksgiving, that we will hear from the federal government what corridors are accepted into the plan. The Federal Railroad Administration has to submit to Congress the corridor ID plan, which are the routes that they are going to provide initial funding to develop, scope out the corridors to see what the corridor could look like, how many frequencies, preliminary capital investment, what the ridership could look like. So we expect there's going to be some big news coming out of the administration by the end of November. So be ready for that, because we're going to need folks like you, because that's another time when if the opponents that are out there will get goosed. And so we need you guys to be able to respond and indicate why this expansion and this network makes a lot of sense. The map that I showed you, the Amtrak Connects Us plan, this is the last time you're going to see that. This is transitioning away from Amtrak's plan to be your plan, to be the state's plans. The federal government is going to, like I said, be making those announcements. Here is sort of an example. Here's a map of what we are pretty sure that the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin applied for here in your region, and potentially with new service on the lines that you indicated there. The state of Minnesota applied for the Northern Lights Express corridor between the Twin Cities and Duluth, as well as in partnership with, I think, Wisconsin for an additional frequency over and above the second frequency between Chicago and the Twin Cities, as well as service to Madison and up the Fox Valley, the Fox Cities up to Green Bay. Kind of just a quick summation of what we think. We think the feds received about 21 applications for improvements to existing corridors. So Hiawatha, additional frequencies. On our Illini-Saluki route in my home state of Illinois, speed upgrades and additional frequencies. The Pierre Marquette route, which goes from Chicago to Grand Rapids, additional frequencies. Same thing with service to Norfolk. St. Louis to Kansas City, which has 2 round trips a day. The state of Missouri wants it to go to 3. And then on the Wolverine service, we have proposed, and the state of Michigan agrees with us, that it should have double the frequencies, not just 3 trains each way a day, but 6. In terms of reroutes and extensions of existing corridors, you can see them there listed. The Heartland Flyer is a service that we operate in partnership with Texas and Oklahoma. That should be extended to Newton. They are working on that. That would create a new connection and close a gap in the network, and on there. So Carlson, the state of Missouri, again, the Carl Sandburg is a train that we run from the small town of Quincy on the Mississippi River to Chicago. The state of Missouri wants that train to begin instead in Hannibal, the home of Mark Twain. And then the new corridors are really exciting. So again, these are just an example, 47 applications at least for brand new corridors. The one that I've spent a lot of time working on, I've spent a lot of time in Green Bay. A lot of support has come from the communities, again, on the Fox Cities, and then the folks in Eau Claire. I think Scott Rogers is on the call with us today, have been really potent in advocating that a second route to the Twin Cities should come via Eau Claire. 3C and D is a reference to the Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton route. That would be a brand new route that we think really has high potential to carry a lot of folks. The steps that would need to be undertaken is once the corridor ID plan is announced, the federal government will begin to provide funding to the states and the entities that apply to begin that sort of scoping process. to sort of lay out what, the general framework of what the corridor should look like. Then we would move into preliminary engineering and environmental clearance if the states decide to continue to participate. And that's really when the states will need to start to come up with local resources to match what will primarily be federally funded. But that is, as I was indicating, that's when the rail will hit when the wheel will hit the rail. If the states are really interested, if they've been added to the corridor ID program, but then now they're going to have to start coming up with some dollars. And so that's when we might start to see the routes, the network shake out, because there are some states that it's easy to take a lot of federal money, but when you start having to contribute some money, that's when it'll be challenging. So I will be working with my team and with advocacy organizations like yours here and around the country to make sure that when we get to that point, that there's enough pressure, enough grassroots support for these corridors, that the state legislators step up and start to provide some money to match with these with federal dollars. And then on into the later phases, our final design and construction. Again, more local dollars will need to be there to match the state dollars. And then once the service is up and running, the feds are going to be pretty generous with providing operating support to get these corridors started. We know we love passenger trains, but despite, even with their economic benefits, they require some taxpayer support, just like any of our other modes. But the feds will try and smooth that transition by providing 90% of the first year's operating support on through 6 years of declining support. And then in the 7th year, hopefully the ridership will be significant enough that the passengers will cover the majority of the route, but there'll still be some local support for taxpayer support for these corridors, just like we have with the Hiawassas today. So what are we doing at Amtrak to make sure that we're ready to assist the states with these projects? We are really bulking up in terms of our intellectual and human resource capacity, our network development department, making sure that we've got the conductors and the train service people out there to provide this train service, and bulking up our maintenance staff to make sure that right now we're getting all the cars out of our Beech Grove maintenance facility out onto the trains to carry all the people that we want to ride. So really modernizing our system. And that's all with the goal of expanding our network and getting more passengers on the trains and providing more service for you, our traveling public. So I talked about what we're doing. We're investing in our fleet. We inked a deal for about $7.5 billion to buy 83 new complete train sets from the Siemens company. We've already are taking delivery of new ALC 42 charger locomotives to re-equip all of our long distance trains. We have the new Acela fleet that some of it's on the property. We're working with the builder to do some final testing to make sure that those trains are safe to operate. They will run at speeds of up to 165 miles per hour. So there are really strict FRA rules in terms of testing. So we hope to begin really aggressive testing on that fleet next year. And of course, in partnership with states like Wisconsin, the states are ahead of these states in the Midwest, where we live, are ahead of the game in terms of acquiring new passenger cars. I rode up on the Hiawatha yesterday, which was an entirely new train of Siemens venture cars and Siemens locomotives. The ride was smooth, well lit, big picture windows. The train was packed, and I kept thinking, this is the future. Everybody was having a good time, relaxed, working, talking to other folks at hushed tones because the ride was so smooth and quiet. We have 2 train sets that are operating between Chicago and Milwaukee. Only one of them is a complete venture set, and gradually, and I'm sure Lisa will talk about this, we'll phase in more of those cars. And then we're in the process of putting out an RFP to order all new long distance fleet to replace all the superliners and the Anfleet 2s that power out sets enable customers to ride on our long distance trains. We've been investing in stations, $800 million in the last 5 or 6 years or so to really improve the front door to your communities and the front door to our trains. These are 2 station grand opening events that I have recently participated in. On your left is Charleston, West Virginia. That's Senator Manchin and Mayor Goodwin of Charleston, who are cutting the ribbon on a $4.5 million project to construct a new platform, redo the interior of the station, new lighting, new signage and new parking. And on the right is the little town of South Shore, Kentucky, which is really the station for the larger city of Portsmouth, Ohio. The Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad didn't go into Portsmouth, but they stop across the river. That town was so excited about their station. I swear half the town came out, the high school band came out, and that ribbon cutting was about 3 weeks ago. A really attractive facility there. Like I said, we're hiring about 4,000 new people this year, so our team needs to grow. We have been growing nonetheless, even before the IIJA. Here's a list of some of the new trains that we've started. You can't see all the way at the top, but I think that's a
Berkshire Flyer is the.
what's the one above that one?
No, that's Route.
Oh, that's Route. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. So the Berkshire Flyer is a new service that we operate in conjunction with the state of Massachusetts, who has become, and the state of New York. It's a train from Chicago to Western Massachusetts. We set up a new, Virginia has been really aggressive in this space. We added a new train to Roanoke, so now they have 2 trains a day. Norfolk, Virginia, a city that hadn't had Amtrak service in decades, now has 3 round trips a day up the corridor. The Ethan Allen service to Burlington, Vermont, still had their Union Station. Burlington, Vermont has not had direct passenger train service since the 50s. So I had a chance to ride that train last year. That was fantastic. They have a cute little downtown. I stayed in the hotel and walked to the depot for a very beautiful ride that again brings more cities into the Amtrak system. Charlotte and Raleigh, that's the state of North Carolina, again very aggressive. We just added a 4th frequency connecting those cities, and then of course our favorite, TCMC, and then the Gulf Coast. That train would be called the Mardi Gras. We're adding 2 frequencies on. Within Amtrak, we know that again, like I said, we've got to bulk up our capacity. We are pretty aggressive. We have some objectives here. We want to expand partnerships, the network and the fleet, and we want to add services to all 50 of the top metropolitan markets in the US by 2040. So our Amtrak Connects Us map reflects that. We want to make sure we get into places like Nashville, Columbus, Ohio, Las Vegas, and to provide service commensurate with their population to places like Atlanta and Houston and Dallas. And we want to get back into Phoenix too. We don't serve Phoenix, the 5th largest city in the United States. How will we do that? We want to secure consistent infrastructure funding. We know we got 5 years of appropriations out of IIJA, but 5 years is going to be over at some point. We got to make sure in order for us to do these long-term projects, we've got to have a steady stream of funding from the Congress to support us, just like they do aviation and highways. And so that's where you guys are going to play a role. It can't be all about an appropriation every few years. We got to know that the dollars are going to be there so we can plan and attract so that we can attract the manufacturers to the United States to help us to build a domestically created passenger rail system. We know that we've got to improve our customer service and operate safely and reliability. We just came out with a passenger bill of rights that you're welcome to view on our website, things that we commit to do. And in the near term, we want to, in the next 5 years, we want to get up to 37 million trips and adjusted operating income of 0. We want to get back to 0 subsidy needed from the federal government. And then we want to double our ridership to 66 million people by 2040. So aggressive goals. If you can hit, and I got a little video for you just to end it up.
As we build to support the soaring demand for train travel, Amtrak Aero is creating jobs even before the trains are on the tracks. The new trains will not only provide world-class product on routes throughout the country, but will also stimulate local economies as we revolutionize the Amtrak experience. We are building the future of Amtrak. Our new trains will transform the Amtrak experience with significant environmental benefits, a progressive design, and world-class amenities. While we advance this vision, we're committed to getting people to where they need to go while reducing road and air congestion, creating jobs, and supporting the American economy. We are investing in the future and building a new era of rail. This is Amtrak Aero.